talked about a topic that is controversial. And we said, you know, in the beginning, that was like how we led into it, was like, people have differing views on this. And I mean, it's gotten us thinking about it and talking about how a lot of what we say is going to be controversial because it is against the grain. And I think that's okay. Because you know, if you're not standing, if no one's getting upset, you're not standing for anything.
Right.
And I would rather stand for something and be vocal about it and have it rub some people the wrong way. And that's okay. But I think the important piece to that is being open to having a dialogue and being open to having this conversation around things that people disagree about, that we might disagree about. And that's where the value is having that conversation. Because if we're all just standing, you know, stubbornly in our own sides and we're like, no, you know, like no one's ever going to move. Nothing's ever going to happen. We're never going to collaborate. We're never going to make progress in that way. We're just going to continue.
Right. We're in checkmate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been an eternal, I was almost going to say battle then, but I don't see it as that. So that would be the wrong word. But I see this as an eternal path to navigate. Right. I mean, I started with animals when I was 5, right? And it's rare to come across people who hate animals. You know, most people lean towards, I like them, you know, some people lean really hard and they're like passionate about them. But, you know, there are so many different ways that we can view animals. Equally, there are so many different ways we can view health, right? View health down the lens of an allopathic model of take a pill, you've got a symptom that'll help relieve the symptom. You'll still be sick, you'll be on, right? That's a viewpoint. But often the emotions creep in a bit more with animals because, I don't know, it's we want to connect with them. We like them. They're defenseless in many ways. They just elicit a lot of emotions. Let's just leave it there without having to unpack that. I think we can probably agree that that's the case. And so all the way through my studies and tertiary and out in the field and doing internships and the whole thing, like I worked in shelters, I worked in conservation, I worked in rescues, I worked in zoos. There are differences of opinions. These people are vegan. These people are hunting, right? They both care about animals very differently, right? And there's no point in like getting into all of the weeds of all those different arguments. But as somebody who wants to, oh golly, more than anything, right, get a good result for the animals, I learned that the best way to do that is for me to listen. Because as much as I've studied and as much as I know about animals or about health or about regenerating your body and anti-aging, whatever, right? As much as I know, I don't know everything. Someone else has taken a different pathway of learning. They've had different experiences with their encounters in life with human or animal, right? And so their story is valid. I can learn from them. They can possibly learn from me, but none of that will happen if we can't have a little bit of humility and say, actually, that's interesting that you disagree with me about that. Let's talk about it. Show me your point of view. Help me understand why this is important for you, why this is a point that you might be sticking to, right? It doesn't mean at the end of the day you're trying to get someone to move out of their silo of belief into your silo of belief. It's not about conversion of anything, right? It's about, let me understand you better so that I can, you know, edify you for the amount of time, care, and effort that you've put into holding that belief and to having the courage to step up and vocalize something that means something to you. I think we all need more advocates in this world who are willing to be brave like that. But it must be tempered with this sense of humility and willingness to listen. And then even if at the end of the day you've gone, okay, well, I understand a lot more, and some of that I can appreciate, I might slot some of that into my thing. But largely I'm still going to hold to where I am, but I appreciate your time and I feel richer because of that. And now I've maybe got a few more ideas of what I could do differently or better on this mission. And this is the thing that I get to the end of the day, because we're all going after better health. We're all going after a happier quality of life. We're all going after improved welfare for our animals. So our blinkers are on and our pathway and destination is over there. We just have different maps to get there. Your map is slightly different to my map, right? But we want the same outcome. So wouldn't it make sense to work together as much as possible in that process, so more people hit that finishing line and more results kind of come to fruition? That's my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line for me in terms of what I feel. I think there's a lot of value in surrounding yourself with people who do have differing opinions than yourself, because again, we're not becoming siloed. We're having, whether that's culture or age or religion or viewpoints, right? Like, that's what makes people well-rounded, is this exposure to people who are unlike them. And it's also this really beautiful experience, right? To be able to see how people live differently, and right, acknowledging that one way isn't better than the other. And at the same time, so that's kind of broadly speaking. But then we start moving into things like, well, we're all working towards more health, but we're going towards it in different ways. So now we're getting a little bit more, we go from something where, why can't this all be accepted? Why are we saying one way is better than the other way, to saying, well, now we are kind of saying one way is better, or we are, right? Because now we're having differing views about approaches or whatnot. And then you have kind of a step further which is ethics. And when one person feels like someone else is truly doing harm, and at what point do you have these conversations around, oh, I'm going to hear you out and let's have this conversation, versus saying, that's not, I don't believe that's okay, and I'm going to put a boundary here of, we're not going to associate because that's harmful. And so I think there's kind of these different tiers. And I just want to kind of like mention that, because as we're talking about having these conversations and being open and willing to have these discussions, there's so much more from a broader perspective, in the social and cultural and political landscape, where, let's be honest, there are people who have views that are harmful to other humans. And that for me is where I put my foot down. And that for me is where I will absolutely speak up, and I won't tolerate. I'm open to a conversation, but I don't feel like that's someone that I can have in my circle, someone who has a view that's, right, I'm coming at from the human side, someone who has a view that is incredibly harmful for other people, and they stand in that because that's how they're approaching the world. So we have sort of these different extremes, but when it comes to what we're talking about, it's really interesting, because what we discuss is not one way or the other way. I mean, we've said so many times that conventional care has its place. We're all for it. And we also need more. We also need to focus on longevity and regenerative medicine and, right, preventative. And so these two don't have to clash, but then we do run into the issues of some nuance, right? Like what we talked about yesterday, or I mean, really any day.
any day, any conversation. But I think to your point, the big key there is boundaries, right? And this applies to any area of your life, with any relationship that you might have, or right, but knowing where the boundary is, knowing what I respect my time here, so someone can call me at that point in time, but I'm not going to answer the phone, right? Because my boundary is that I'm doing something else. I'm working at this time. I'm in a meeting with somebody else. I'm having coffee with a friend they deserve my attention and invested in them. I'm not going to pick up the calls, right? That's a boundary that I'll work to. If you have my attention, you have all of my attention, right? That's a voluntary boundary that I have, except for emergencies. And of course, that's, we don't have to go into the nuance, but the boundary of where you feel like you're safe or not safe, where you're honorable or not honorable, where you're holding integrity or you're not holding integrity, those absolutely are non-viable, right? And you can do it. You take the same approach that we've just been talking about of saying, I hear what you're saying. That's a hard no from me. If you're willing to continue on a friendship level where we just agree to never bring this topic up, then we may be able to continue with that. But if that's too important for you to express or to communicate, then I'm gonna be stepping away. I'm gonna be pulling back from that, because that's too much of a clash on my boundary. That's too much of an ideological misalignment that I don't feel it's conducive. Right? We how do we make that into a positive thing? I don't think we can. So let's make all the around things positive, and there's the hard line there. And we both know that in advance. So, and if you have respect for each other, and this is the key thing, is like, why can't we just respect each other and accept people, right, a little bit more? But when you do have acceptance for someone, why would you want to prod at them and rub them up the wrong way and cross that line and trigger them into feeling like you'd betrayed the line, right? Why do that? So you get boundaries. 100% love that you brought up boundaries.
And I think within the space of pet and parent longevity, we always want to create a space where people can share their differing views. We've also run into issues where we had to put boundaries, and we've had to ask people to leave the group before because they said some things that were incredibly harmful and cruel to people in the group. But again, there's a boundary there. And in terms of having differing views as a whole, I mean, that's totally fine.
That's how we learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, though, it goes without saying that it is hard on Facebook. Like, it's hard to
on any non-direct platform, whatever, even on the phone, because you can't even see someone's face unless you're on a video call, right? So there's too many ways that what's intended falls through the cracks.
Totally. And it's hard to have the nuanced conversation. It's hard to, and then you sit there and you you overthink your words, and then you're analyzing each person's word, and then we lose the forest for the trees. Is that the saying? I always flip it. We lose the trees for the forest. You know what I mean, right? Like we're like, oh, but this person said this one thing. It's like, well, that's not what they meant, right? Bigger picture. Anyway, it's really challenging in that way, but and I think it goes to show, like, even just with our experience of trying to navigate that and wanting to have conversations with people, but also feeling like we're kind of in the confines, right, of our, your little keyboard. But I think that is where so much of it comes from, just in terms of the bigger landscape of heated, argumentative conversations in society as a whole, when so much of it is happening behind screens and keyboards, because we're not having that real connection. We aren't really connecting with that person. We're likely not even really fully understanding what their perspective is and why. And so it's just kind of an interesting social experiment, if you will, and little glimpse into a bigger issue of not being able to have these conversations with each other.
Yeah, I think at the root, like, how, like, digging down to the root cause of these things, anything, I think the root cause of a lot of this is insecurity and lack of validation, right? And that itself went through a social experiment with COVID and lockdown, right? Suddenly you have a situation where people aren't allowed to connect with people. You can't have conversations like you did face to face, a normal life, right? Or everyone's in their little jail cells and locked around, right? So, and at the same time, there's massive fear mongering going on. There's massive, like, social upheaval and change. There's massive, like, it's a crisis situation, right? And people need to be able to connect with people to I can't even say the words, like to resolve that, to figure out how to live that life, to go through it, to survive, to support each other, to solve it. And that was the very thing that was denied. And so you already had a sort of a growing malaise of people feeling very insecure one way or another, not being validated, and then that just multiplied it 1,000-fold to the point where you had like people instantly cutting each other off and cancel culture this, and I'm not talking to you that, and we're going to have a rift for life, and if you think why did you have to get like that about it? Like what stopped you having some grace and some kindness and patience and the ability to listen? What stopped you from holding on to the love that you had for that person previously in whatever relationship style that was? What took that away that made you so inclined to fight tooth and nail like a cornered beast? That's a really, I mean, we're kind of going off track here, but it's, let's wind the clock back. Anti-aging, that worked well. Like let's socially or emotionally or relationally or etiquette wise, I don't know, pick a word, wind that clock back as we wind your age clock back, and go to a time where you didn't have to fight for survival. You could just be nice. You could just be a human being with decent manners and say, you're talking, I'll keep listening.
Well, if I can interject and disagree, I don't know that we really ever had a time like that. I think it's easy to.
I just lived in my imaginary world.
Yeah. I think we're going to your happy place right now, but I don't know that time has ever really existed fully. But I think we can take pieces from the past that have worked well, right? Like having face-to-face conversations, like being able to discuss nuance around certain issues. And yeah, I know that we both prioritize that in terms of our own approach to what we do, our approach to learning, and also building this community as well. So if you disagree with us, that's okay.
That's okay.
Well, I feel like I've kind of run out of words. It is a really big topic. And I think it's important to have conversations like these and kind of remind ourselves and anyone who cares to listen to these lives, what kind of a culture we're creating here, and leaving that door open for further discussion.
Yeah. And if it aligns with your boundaries, welcome.
At the end of the day, if you don't like us, you don't have to be here. So that's the beauty of it. Well, on that note, we're having a workshop tomorrow. Penny, do you want to talk about that workshop?
Yeah, so we're having our improve relationships with your dog workshop through how to be their parent, their leader, their guide, the one that is setting those boundaries and establishing an etiquette, how to get the best out of that relationship. So there is cooperation and there's kindness going backwards and forwards, rather than a battle about wills of like, well, I want to do this, no, but the rules are that, right? Let's create that harmonious situation. So this is a super practical workshop where you can walk home, you don't have to walk anywhere, you're at home learning, where you can go home with very tangible solutions, very practical steps that you can literally start implementing even live as we're doing it, like in the privacy of your own home, but ways to enhance the communication backwards and forwards. Consistency and clarity of message is so important for our dogs. And this applies to cats too, although our workshop is specifically geared to dogs. But like I said yesterday in our live, the principles of ethical kindness training are the same regardless of what species you are. So I've used exactly the same kind of, positive reinforcement, clicker training stuff with my cats as with dogs. So super practical. We're going to have fun training games in there that are a bit of a giggle. And if you do want to copy us and do that with your own friends at some point, it is a laugh. So that's a fun one to pull out at a party at some point as well down the line. And we'll just hang out and have fun. And that's what these things are for. They're to bless you, enrich you with some more skills, and we'll see you there.
So keep an eye out for the link to sign up. It's tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. It's 2 full hours. First half is going to be like principles and theories and whatnot. Second half is going to be all the hands-on. Get your notepads ready. Antonio, our expert guest, he has such a heart of gold and comes from such a place of love and has just a really great energy. So I'm sure you guys are going to love him. So we will see you